This NBA free agency recap and Damian Lillard trade request episode of the NBA Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Circa Sports. Circa Sports is back with your Circa Survivor and Circa Millions contest. $14 million up for grabs. Get all the details at circasports.com. Welcome, everyone, to the NBA Gambling Podcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Monday, July the 3rd, currently 1:04 on the East Coast. Here to discuss the NBA free agency and the signings that we saw over the weekend as free agency kicked off on July 1st. And also, we'll talk about the Damian Lillard trade request. I think has been some news that has dropped right before we got on. I'll try to get updates on that. But joining me here to break it all down, you guys know him as the tennis guru. It's a huge week in tennis as Wimbledon kicked off this morning. It's Scott Studio Reichel. Scott, 20-1 isn't a bad weekend, my man.
Yeah, it wasn't. Eubanks came through for me, which was nice. Wimbledon officially started today, so hopefully we all make some money going through the tournament. But, of course, here for basketball purposes, I know Delonte's been busy prepping some summer league stuff, but unfortunately he's going to have to save that for another show. This is a free agency episode, but still, looking forward to recapping the news. A lot of insane amounts of money going around, and unfortunately for me, genetics did not let me be about 5-6 inches taller, so now I actually have to work for a living.
Also joining us, the man's a sicko. He's deep diving into summer league right now. He's breaking down the rosters. Hey, he's gonna try to find you money. Maybe we'll touch on it briefly at the end of the episode, depending on time. But it's Lonte Smith. Lonte, summer league kicking off, my man. You excited?
Yeah, man. I'm very excited for it. Looking forward to the games kicking off. Tipping off in about like 2 hours. So. Yeah, looking forward to that, and looking forward to breaking down some of these contracts and I guess moves that certain teams are positioning themselves to make. So looking forward to breaking that down with you guys.
Yeah, I mean, like Scott and Lonte mentioned, we'll kind of go through, maybe go team by team, and then maybe at the end we'll kind of do a winners and losers type of thing on who we thought had the most significant signings to improve their rosters to, not only maybe get into playoff contention, but also maybe make that championship run. And then, like I mentioned, we'll also talk about the Damian Lillard trade request officially after X amount of years that transpired over the weekend as well. So, guys, this is start with the team that, gave out the most money in free agency. That is my Houston Rockets. And there's been a lot of conflicting opinions, at least locally and nationally as well, just because they gave the amount of money that the two players that they did give was, number one, Fred VanVleet. They gave the 3-year, $130 million max extension. Now, the third year is an option, is what I read from a local reporter who's in with their Houston Rockets. So the third year is a player option for Fred VanVleet. And then the other signings that they did make, the big one, obviously, Dillon Brooks, 4 years, $80 million. I also got a note this morning from a friend that one is also incentive-based. It may not obviously be the entire $80 million being paid out, but those were the two hot names that the Rockets were rumored to sign in this offseason, along with Brook Lopez. But they do get two out of the three guys that they were targeting in Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks. Lonte, let's start with you here, man. We can talk about these two guys. And I know you were in the camp of letting the Rockets young guys cook. I know they made some trades to make some cap space. They traded or made some roster space, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
They traded away Ty Washington. They traded Garuba. They traded KJ Martin. And then they also ended up trading Josh Christopher over to the Grizzlies as part of the Dillon Brooks deal. But what was your kind of reaction or thoughts about this trades? And maybe how does it may or may not, in your opinion, improve the Rockets roster?
Well, I would have felt a lot better about the Fred VanVleet money if they would have got Brook Lopez, but instead, I think that's kind of a high number for VanVleet, who barely can shoot 40% from the field. I think the Rockets guards, as constructed, are pretty much, set. And I'm one for, you got those young guys you develop with Jalen Green. Tari Eason is coming along pretty good. Jabari is going to be what he's going to be. So I'm kind of like on both sides. I can't pick a side as to what I think about the Rockets as a whole. But VanVleet, like you mentioned, I think you've been saying it all offseason. They needed an adult in the room. They get that with VanVleet, who's he's a proven winner. He's won a championship, performed at the highest level. He was an undrafted free agent, worked his way to the top, so he can install some of that work ethic in those young guys and, be kind of a vet for them. Dillon Brooks, I didn't mind Dillon Brooks, but at that price, it's kind of steep because, at the end of the day, who was going to give him 4 for 80? I don't think any of us can think of a team who would give him 4 for 80. Would have liked him to get a little bit less than that, but it is what it is. He's outside of, the antics and not speaking to the media. He still is a good defender. He's still a good defender. He's going to be attacking the basket at a high level. Now, the Rockets need some outside shooting. I don't think he'll provide that. But again, he's been on a part of a young team before. He's still young in his own right, but on this roster, he's kind of the OG of this roster. But I like Dillon Brooks more than most, especially on a defensive-minded team. Now, Ime is going to love him probably. Ime is going to love his intensity. He's just got to cut out the antics or whatever. But on the court, I think he'll be fine. That's kind of a high price for him. Outside of that, man, I think I think Amen is the big loser here because him and Jalen on the court together, I thought was going to be pretty special, especially with how they attack the rim and their athleticism. But now he kind of has to, maybe it'll be good, but maybe he has to develop a jumper, turn into a spot up shooter of some sort and use athleticism with the second unit. But yeah, I thought Amen was the biggest loser, and I was the most excited about him playing with the Houston Rockets lineup.
Yeah, I know that during the regular season, we talked a lot about how bad this Rockets defense was. And from the things that I read and things that my friends are sending me here locally, that obviously Dillon Brooks, for the amount of money that they did pay, again, some of it is incentive based. I'll try to get those details, maybe on the next pod that we do or kind of tweet it out. But he's obviously going to be that primary defender for the Houston Rockets. And like you mentioned, Lonte, that outside of the antics and what he says post game or before the game or whatever, the dances that he does, that he's still a good defender. Now, is it warranted to pay him that much money? I was in the camp that I completely didn't want him on this Rockets team just because he did leave a sour taste in my mouth over the last several seasons, especially in the playoffs on the things that he does say. But again, if he just comes in, works his tail off, Udoka keeps him in check, and he plays good hard-nosed defense and doesn't jack up 10 threes this game, I guess I'm okay with it. Again, the theme kind of has been for a lot of Rockets fans in the conversations that I have with friends is that the motto is, let's see what happens, right? Let's see what happens with Udoka and how this roster is constructed. And another low-key signing that did make that kind of flew under the radar, they brought back another veteran in Jeff Green. He signed a 1-year deal, about $5-6 million, to be a guy in the locker room to hold these young guys accountable and maybe be another voice in the locker room for the Rockets. So, for the Fred VanVleet deal, the third-year the team option, I think made a huge difference for me, in my opinion. Again, as far as guards go, I think that he's now the second highest paid guard, if I'm not mistaken. And the shooting woes have been a huge concern for Fred VanVleet over the past several seasons. Hopefully that's something that improves. Maybe he needed a change of scenery. We'll see what happens. But again, the Rockets had $60+ million to spend in free agency, and they had to throw money at, someone. Now, that is Fred VanVleet. Give him kudos for taking the most money that was probably offered to him by any single team. and he took advantage of that. Maybe same thing with Dillon Brooks as well. I know there's a lot of conversation after the season was over that he's probably going to end up playing in China, but he's down here in Houston now, and that's something that we're going to deal with. So I think a lot of the pressure right now is on Ime Udoka on how he's going to, number one, play out these rotations and what the game plan is going to be for him for the upcoming season. But I think personally for me, if we're able to stay healthy, this could be a fringe play-in tournament team because obviously the young talent is there. You added some veterans. Now you have a great head coach. The possibility is there for sure. Scott, thoughts on Brooks and Fred VanVleet and what it kind of means for the Rockets for this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think the Rockets are one of the biggest losers of free agency, and I don't think it's really close. They're not the biggest loser. Biggest loser is Portland. Shout out to them.
It's a bigger loser than them, though, too. We'll get to that later.
It could be. Well, agree to disagree. I think Portland takes the cake because that Grant contract is next level bad. But anyway, I don't understand anything of what Houston did over the course of the last week and change. I understand the argument is they want some veteran presence in that locker room, but Houston had a bunch of young talent that you kind of wanted to see grow through reps. Your team's not going to be that good. And then they decide, you know what, let's give Fred VanVleet $40+ million. Ironic, he's getting paid more per season than his shooting percentage in his career. So that's kind of fascinating. But Fred VanVleet, his entire career, by the way, is a career 40.2% shooter from the floor. I've been very low on VanVleet. I think he's an extremely overrated basketball player. I know he was a pretty good facilitator last year, but still, I am not a fan of his game. I think, honestly, his best role is a sixth man because he won the title as a sixth man. But I understand as an undrafted player, good for him. He got paid a bunch of money. Biggest contract for an undrafted player in the history of the league. But I don't think he's that good, and I don't think Dillon Brooks is that good either. So I felt like Houston had cap space and said, we got to spend it on somebody. Yeah. And they just overpaid for two veteran guys, which you could argue helps the locker room, maybe, but at the end of the day, they just had a bunch of money and they spent it on two guys that really don't move the needle whatsoever. So I don't like what Houston did at all. I don't think VanVleet's that good. You can argue for leadership, but we'll see. I don't think he's that good of a basketball player, though. And Brooks, I understand defensively he's good. Offensively, he is a chucker. I mean, let's just be real. Yeah. So I'm not a fan of what Houston did. I like the Jeff Green signing. Yes. I don't know why he went to Houston, but Jeff Green was a pretty interesting acquisition there too. But I mean, I really don't like what Houston did, just simply put. I think Portland, though, is the biggest loser. Delonte has another one to mention. The Jeremy Grant contract is one of the worst contracts given out in a while because he can't stay healthy. And I don't want to fully pivot over to Portland. This VanVleet contract's bad. It's not Jeremy Grant bad. Like, this Jeremy Grant contract is significantly worse.
Yeah, I think I'm in the camp. Then we can move over to Portland here because I think we spent a little too much time talking about we're some of the worst teams in the league. But
it's your favorite team, so
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's my team. That's money that the Fred VanVleet deal. I think a majority of our fans would have rather given that to him than James Harden because James Harden. I mean, we've seen over the past several seasons that injury is a concern and that he's not really a leader. In the locker room. And again, the offense would have just been more ISO basketball with Harden if he was on the floor and who had signed with this Houston Rockets team. And yeah, I understand 100% that the contracts, both of these contracts are not the greatest. And when we talk about money that's been being spent, that most of these guys are not worthy of it. But again, like we mentioned, like it's that the Rockets just had to spend the money on someone, or on a couple players. So I love the Jeff Green signing. Like you mentioned, Scott. I don't know why he did come back, but I'm glad that he did. Again, it probably should be a voice on the sideline for the Houston Rockets. But yeah, that's where we're coming out with the Rockets. Again, they've signed 3 guys. They also ended up signing Jock Lindell. I don't think we discussed that. I think that once that Brook Lopez returned to the Milwaukee Bucks,
what did he get again? 8 per? He got 4
it's about 4 years and 32.
Yeah, I like Lindell.
Yeah, I don't hate that. So yeah, they got some rotation pieces, got some veterans. We'll see how it all pans out. You guys mentioned Portland here. Scott, if you want to continue just expanding on the Jeremy Grant deal, when I saw the deal, 5 years, $160 million for a guy like you mentioned that is very often injured. maybe not worthy of this contract either, but now he's locked up. I didn't see what the exact number was for the guaranteed money, but again, just overall, this contract just wasn't very good, Scott.
Yeah, so just to read off the amount of games that he's played for the last couple of years, played 71 in the 2019-2020 season. From that point forward, 54 games, 47 games, 63 games. They gave him $160 million. And the argument is for Portland, well, Lillard wanted them to bring back Jeremy Grant. And you thought, okay, maybe they did it because they wanted to keep Lillard happy. So they paid Grant all this money, and then Lillard demanded a trade anyway. So I don't know why they even bothered giving Grant all this money. Portland, the more time I actually spend looking at the decisions they make, they are easily a bottom 3 front office in the league. Arguably bottom 1. They might be the worst front office in the league at this point. The Wizards always took the cake for the last decade, but now it seems like Washington actually knows kind of what they're doing because they kind of cleaned house. I don't know what Portland's doing. The fans don't know what they're doing. They're lucky that Scoot fell into their laps, but I mean, the Jeremy Grant signing, that contract is one of the worst contracts that have been given out. And it was one of the first contracts given out too.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand it. Now the argument is, well, if they trade Lillard anyway, then eventually they arrived at the right conclusion, which was trading Lillard for picks and trying to rebuild. But can you really rebuild when you pay an injury-prone player $30+ million for no reason? I figured they were going to let Grant walk, trade Lillard for picks, and rebuild the whole thing from the bottom 4 upwards. But instead, they kept Grant around, who's going to kill some of their cap space in general. And I guess the argument is you got to overpay guys to get them to stay in Portland. I don't think Portland wanted Jeremy Grant for $30+ million a year. So that is one of, on shorthand, I could probably think of some contracts that could rival it. That's the worst contract that I saw for large amounts of money. That's an abysmal contract. I give Portland's offseason an F. I'll give Houston a D, maybe a C-, but Portland's getting an F. I mean, Portland's been atrocious this entire offseason.
All right, before we get over and continue this conversation, we'll get Lonte thoughts on Portland, but I'm excited, man. It's the NFL season is approaching, and we have a new sponsor on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. That is Circa Sports. Circa Millions and Circa Survivor are back. Derek Stevens, a friend of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, he's feeling generous. He's giving away $14 million in guaranteed prizes that are up for grabs between these two contests. Circa Millions, if you haven't played it, it's pretty simple. You pick five NFL picks against the spread each week. Each one you get correct, you get a point, you climb up the leaderboard. Circa Survivor, it's a little different. You just pick a different money line pick every single week. Your team wins, they survive on to the next week. The last man standing pretty much gets that money in the Circa Survivor contest. You can only enter in Vegas. Hey, who doesn't want to go out to Vegas? Spend a weekend there with the Sports Gambling Podcast. Sean and Ryan will be out there the last weekend in August. Make sure you sign up. And if you are out of state, you have to have a proxy to have someone there to enter your picks for you. But you can get all the details at circasports.com. Again, that's circasports.com. Hey, I'm entering, and if I win, I'm going to throw a huge party on a yacht for all the guys on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. So everybody on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is invited to that party if I do win the money. But again, head over to circasports.com to get all the details for the Circa Sports and Circa Survivor contest. Lonte, you want to expand on the Jeremy Grant deal, man? 5 years, $160 million. I think it's really predicated on what Scott was mentioning, that maybe Damian Lillard wanted him to stay there. They signed him for the amount of money, and Dame, a few days later, is like, I'm out of here, guys.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think I said this maybe like during the brink of free agency, but I thought that Dame having them in this kind of mind game Jedi thing kind of screwed them to the offseason, because, I mean, 1 minute he wants to go, 1 minute he wants to stay. I want to see what you guys are going to do. And now he's completely out. So
there was no clear mindset for the front office going in, but that's also their problem.
Yeah, no, it is their fault, but it's also, I mean, I guess they want to have some respect for Dame for, what he did for the franchise. But at the end of the day, man, You got to be better than this. You knew that Dame didn't want to be a part of it, especially when you couldn't move the third pick to get some contenders for what Dame wanted to see in order for him to come back. But the Grant deal is horrible. I mean, he put up a lot of empty stats on the Detroit team. He's probably going to do that in Portland if he stays healthy. Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what Portland was doing in the draft. I have no idea what they're doing now. Excited to see Scoot and Shaden, be able to put up like 20 shots apiece. But outside of that, man, I have no words for what Portland is doing, and I'm not even sure that they'll be able to get back a decent haul for Lillard. I mean, he wants to go to Miami. Are they gonna, I guess, fall to his needs because he wants to go to Miami? Miami doesn't have the most attractive haul for Damian Lillard, so it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, I like their core with Shaden and Scoot. If they can get some draft picks and move off that Nurkic contract, which I think they're probably gonna have to do in order to get some other guys to come back to them. And Nurkic deal is horrible also for a guy who doesn't play. So I got to get him off the roster. So outside of that, man, I mean, I had no idea what Portland was doing from the beginning. I felt like they were in limbo with Dame, and that caused them to be even worse than what they were.
I think it was telling for me that during the draft, they didn't trade that number 3 overall pick to get another all-star superstar player next to Dame. I think then Dame would have been like, all right, even if it was, I'm throwing a name out there. Let's just say it was for a guy like Paul George, that type of caliber player, or a guy that, Damian Lillard, is good friends with and is a great basketball player as well. They, you bring in a secondary player like that or another co-star with Damian Lillard, then Damian would be like, all right, I'm going to stick around here. But again, this franchise, like, Scott mentioned it, Delonte, you mentioned it as well, that they don't know what direction they're going in. And again, now they're gonna have to make a complete overhaul. And depending on what they get back for Damian Lillard, whether it's draft capital, whether it's a up and coming young superstar player to pair with Scoot Henderson, whether it is with Shaden Sharp and Scoot are going to be very exciting. You're 100% correct about that. Yeah. That's gonna be a fun backcourt to watch out for the upcoming season. So
I think that's the main problem that I kind of have with Portland, though, is that I agree that they needed a full overhaul. And once they actually made the third selection for Scoot, you knew that at that point, okay, they're clearly going in a younger direction, so they're going to trade Lillard. But if you're going to complete overhaul it, then why would you pay Jeremy Grant? That goes against every single thing this new plan is suggesting. So that goes back to your point. They have no sense of direction. But once you took Scoot, who also plays the same position as Dame, you kind of knew at that point that, all right, well, if we're going to take Scoot, that means Lillard's probably on his way out of here shortly. So then why would you pay somebody $160 million when your team is probably going to be rebuilding?
Yeah, so my question to both of you guys is what would you theoretically want for Dame? Like what direction do you go in? What do you want to get, like a
draft picks at this
draft
point?
Picks? And you don't want any players at all, like a tier C level type of player to come in, or no?
Well, it depends who they trade him to, because truth is Miami really doesn't have many.
Yeah, they don't have anything. They're gonna have a third team. They're gonna have to have. They don't have anything. I mean, Hero's not gonna. Hero, Robinson.
No, there's rumors Hero might go to the Nets because they needed a third team for the trade in the first place, and Hero wouldn't even be going to Portland.
Yeah.
And also, like, who has the most attractive trade package for Damian Lillard? I think Miami's probably at the bottom of that totem pole.
I think Toronto does. What do you think about Toronto?
Maybe. I don't know.
But if, like, Toronto, if they, like, again, like the whole thing we're confused about, and that's why we're talking about, is that we don't know what direction Portland wants to go.
Right.
Like,
that's my main question. Yeah.
Right. Like, so if you're trading to Toronto, then you have to throw in a Pascal Siakam
give me Pascal.
or Stat,
OG.
Right? They're not OG. Yeah. They're not going to throw in Scotty Barnes because he's part of their future there, right? Mm-hmm. We already saw Sixers said that they're not extending Tyrese Maxey, if I'm not mistaken. If that's what I read. Is Philly a possibility that you throw in start a trade package around Tyrese Maxey and then have him paired up with a Shaden Sharp or Scoot Henderson? Maybe that creates a long jam in the backcourt for them. But I think I'm with Scott. I think it's draft capital for me, number one. And then if you have a young player or two that you want to include in that trade package that is attractive to Portland, I would go for that. But again, we're talking about Portland here. They might just fumble away this trade and maybe we'll see a similar trade of what transpired for CP3 or Jordan Poole type of deal. But
maybe.
I mean, look, we're on the subject of Portland here, so we might as well just talk about the trade request. Obviously, we talked about it with Dame. Lonte, let me start with you. The destinations that have been talked about, the rumor has been Miami, Philly has been in that conversation. I think Scott's Brooklyn has also been mentioned as well, but I don't think that's a place that Damian Lillard wants to go because he does want to compete for a championship. So I
just
think,
to be clear, the Nets are involved because they would be the
third
team
Yeah,
to send
100%.
Lillard to Miami. I'm not saying Lillard's going to Brooklyn. I'm saying Brooklyn might be involved as the third team. That was my point.
So it seems like the two teams right now is Philly and it is in the Miami Heat. And we just talked about the trade package from the Miami Heat may not be very attractive as far as
maybe New Orleans if you want to throw them in there too.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, what do you guys think, Scott? Let me start with you. Which team makes the most sense for a guy like Damian Lillard right now between the couple of teams? And if there is another team, like you mentioned, maybe New Orleans is another team. Maybe send it back with CJ McCollum. What do you think?
See, as a Nets fan, I experienced this firsthand with Durant last year. There's such a desire for franchises to remain loyal to the guy that wants to leave their franchise by sending that player to the exact destination that he wants to go to, which doesn't make any damn sense, by the way, because if you're running a business, get the best offer you can. And yet, for the Nets, it kind of worked out because Phoenix gave them 4 first-round picks, and Bridges turned out to be really, really good, and Cam Johnson's been good too. But in this case, if I'm Portland, and Lillard, I know Lillard's been arguably the best player in franchise history at this point. If he wants to go to a team that has no real desirable assets for me to get back in return, I'm not trading you to that team to make you happy. Like, I don't understand the thought process. You're trying to run a business. And you can argue, it's not right because you're treating the player poorly. He's leaving your franchise. Try to do the best you can to keep your team from being irrelevant for a long period of time. So it's definitely not Miami. I think Miami's got an abysmal trade package that I think Portland's going to end up accepting anyway, to be honest. I think he's going to end up going to Miami.
Yeah.
Philly, if Maxi's truly available, that's better than anything Miami could offer. I'm a big Maxi guy. I don't think Maxi's available, to be honest, but I do think we're going to have to wait and see. But when you're looking at all the different packages, Toronto's the best package if you want to talk about Siakam being a realistic option to get back. New Orleans, maybe if Zion's on the market, but I doubt it. I doubt Portland wants to even get into the Zion business at this point. So you don't have many options. So I think trading Lillard's harder than you might think because you feel like you're going to be losing the trade anyway because the teams that can make a move forward don't have the greatest pieces to give back to you. Toronto has the best pieces, but there's no way they're sending him to Toronto because they want to make Lillard happy because he was that important to the franchise. I think he's going to Miami. I think it's going to be an abysmal return for Portland, and this team's going to be bad for a long time.
Lonte, trade destinations.
Man, so Ramona Shelburne reported that he is a big fan of the Spurs culture, so to say. So I don't know if he just put that out there just to put it out there, but I mean he's obviously not winning the title there. But it's not many places that he can go.
How much help does Wembanyama need?
Yeah, I mean, God, you have Keldon Johnson, Jesus.
So my thing is, it's only about 4 or 5 teams that if he's on if he gets traded to, they're instantly like competing for a championship. I mean, I think that's Boston, Milwaukee. I mean, the Lakers, but they can't get him. I'm just going by like realistically. Like
I don't think Boston can get him either. So.
Now Boston can do. They haven't signed Jaylen Brown yet. They can do something with it
in theory, but I don't see that happening.
So I mean,
again, I understand the point you're trying to make. Sorry.
Yeah. So Brooklyn. I mean, if he goes to Brooklyn, I mean, what are they, like a 5 seed, 6 seed? They're not. Yeah, they're not contending for the title.
I love acquiring $60 million per year players to be a 5 seed in the Eastern Conference.
And I mean, Philly, if they get rid of Maxey, I mean. Are they really in much of the same? I mean, a different spot? I don't think so.
They're not winning anything.
Yeah, a place that I would love to see him go and that has the pieces and a person who has the balls to do it is Ballmer with the Clippers. Like I think they got a bunch of young pieces. The Clippers. They got Paul George to throw at them. They got a bunch of great young players. I mean, they can throw in Norman Powell. They got a couple of young guys that they just drafted. Jordan Miller, who's really he's like not a 3-and-D guy, but he has the potential to get there.
Terrence Mann's been linked to about 5,000
yeah, Terrence
trades
Mann. They have a decent amount of players, so that's a team that I'm surprised is not like higher up on that list. Especially they just brought back Westbrook for pennies on the dollar, so I think they have a decent amount of pieces to be able to do it. And I think Ballmer opening up that new arena in Inglewood. I think Dame, if you put Dame and Kawhi on the court, I think that's an instant title contender. Of course, if it's health prohibited. But yeah, I think the Clippers is an interesting destination that not a lot of people are talking about. Now, is he going to go to Miami? I mean, he probably will. I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to try to appease him and get him to where he wants to go. It just shows good faith and has, when the players are up to come to Portland, they're going to remember, oh, they took care of Dame, so if anything happens, they'll take care of me. But I think he should try to get to not he, but I think the Clippers should try to make a move for him. I mean, they have the most interesting package, I think, in the NBA. I don't think anybody can rival what they can do with a proven player in Paul George, some young assets, and I'm not sure if they have many picks, but they can throw in some picks or some swaps or whatever. Maybe add a third team and get some more picks. So I think the Clippers is an interesting destination for Dame.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was the James Harden deal, he opted into that player option, but now they're trying to find a trade for James Harden. And Clippers were one of the teams that were linked to the Philly and James Harden trade just because of the assets that they do have to make a trade. But obviously, Dame Lillard at this juncture of his career is on another level right now, as far as where James Harden has been dealing with the injuries over the past several seasons. All right, guys, before we continue the conversation here, let me tell everyone about Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 4 is here, and Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. Underdog Pick'em is also a great way to get down on your favorite MLB and NFL season-long player props. So many different ways to win over on Underdog, and Underdog is available in so many different states. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus of up to $100. Again, that's UnderdogFantasy.com using promo code SGPN. All right, guys, any other thoughts on Dame? Scott, anything else we want to mention for Portland overall or Dame overall?
I don't think Portland's worth my time, to be honest.
Lonte, anything else?
No, man, get him to the Clippers. That'll be a great. They can get a great haul.
Do we all agree though that he's going to go to Miami because that's where he wants to go?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm a zag there. I
think there has to be a 3-team deal for him to end up on Miami.
Right, but
I think you're going to make it work.
If you're an Eastern Conference team, do you really want to help Miami get Damian Lillard?
The Nets might get Tyler Hero, so I don't really care. Like that's a pretty good consolation prize.
His little brother just committed to South Carolina. It's going to be a good get for your Nets in 2028, Scott.
I'll keep that in mind. If we have our own picks in 2028.
Maybe.
Lonte, you mentioned there's another team that you thought that had or even a worse free agency.
I'm curious where you're going to go with this because Portland was really, I feel like most people's biggest loser.
We got to guess here, Scott. Let's put it for ourselves.
Well, I got two teams, but I got one that I'm really
worse than Portland.
I'm really down on. Two teams I'm really down on as far as
I'm going to guess.
Yeah,
Chicago because they paid Vucevic again.
Yeah, I mean Chicago. Yeah. I don't think that they're even worth talking about. Yeah, not Chicago though. Not Chicago.
Okay, I thought that was an underrated guess.
It is an Eastern Conference team. Both of them, I think. Yeah, both of them Eastern Conference teams.
Okay, I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess Cleveland.
Yeah, Cleveland.
Oh, because they paid Strus all that money and.
Bro, this is one of my things. I think so. Before you get to the other one, I'll just expand real quick. So Cleveland. They have a big issue. I think Donovan Mitchell is probably going to want out of there by next summer. So by this time next summer, I think he's going to want out. I mean, they're not building anything around that roster. You signed Karis LeVert back, who was a complete ghost in the playoffs. You don't have wing depth. Okoro is there, and you insert him back in the lineup. He's supposed to be a 3-and-D guy, but more so just defensively is where he hangs his hat, and he couldn't do anything offensively. You're playing two offensive liabilities when it comes to Allen and Mobley. Mobley is better offensively, and I have more faith that he'll get better offensively. But Allen is
I've been low on Mobley offensively for a while.
Yeah, I think he'll get there. He'll get there.
The point is he's still a work in
Yeah,
progress.
yeah. At the end of the day, he is. But Jared Allen is way worse. He doesn't even look at the basket unless it's a lob. So again, and now you sign Max Strus, who I like Max Strus. I really do. I think he's a good piece for them. But again, I mean, do you really want to trust him on a court with? I mean, not Lillard, with Garland and Mitchell? You got 3 undersized guards in the Eastern Conference that's dominated by guards and wings. So who's going to guard who? Like, who are you going to have to guard Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, RJ Barrett to a lesser degree? Like some of these bigger wing guys, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, like some of these guys, I don't know if they are capable of basically uplifting their roster. And I thought, Niang is fine, I guess, but he can shoot. But again, what are you accomplishing? I feel like Niang and Strus are the same player. They both have similar upside. Niang has a little bit more size to him to be able to be better defensively. But I didn't like anything Cleveland did, especially signing LeVert back. I thought that was a big loser. They wasted a lot of their money on 2 of the same players, in my opinion.
I didn't really like their moves either, but I was so focused on the high-profile names that were signing elsewhere. I didn't fully, group everything. Cleveland did.
Look at their roster.
It's a really bad off. It's a really bad offseason.
Like what are they doing? Like and you got a chance with Mitchell, Garland, and Mobley to actually do some damage in the East. I mean, that's 3 high-level players. Mobley being a defensive anchor. They probably move off of Allen. I mean, I would have loved for them to try to go and get a wing or 2, maybe even 3. I mean, they need wing depth. We saw what New York was able to do to them in the playoffs. I mean, pretty much bullied them, and that was Cleveland style. They usually played them more physical.
Mitchell Robinson killed their entire front court.
Right. So I didn't like anything that Cleveland did at all.
It felt like Cleveland completely overreacted to what happened in that Knicks series, because the main story that I noticed during that series was nobody on Cleveland could shoot. And now they just invested in a bunch of 3-point shooters who really don't do anything else besides shoot 3-pointers. Right. So now they're just going to have some liabilities on defense to try to improve the spacing. But it doesn't change the fact, though, that as a whole, they don't have many options offensively who can create their own shot. So Cleveland, I think, is a pretty fair call, actually. I did think Portland was worse just because of the fact they're also going to be losing Dame. And Dame, of course, is a superstar player. But I get the point.
Yeah, the thing with Portland is at least they're getting something back. They're going to get something. They're going to get something back. The Grant contract is horrible. But I think they more so did that to appease Lillard, and then he hit him with the, I want to be out of here.
But anyway. Cleveland's going to go from a 4 seed that lost in the first round to arguably a 4 seed that lost in the first round, the same exact
or maybe worse, because the East is
worse,
better. Yeah, the East is better. And again, did they watch Max Strus play in high leverage situations?
He was good on occasion, like once a series.
Yeah, but for that money, I need him to be better than occasion.
If they play Boston 82 times in a season, maybe he'll do pretty well. But I don't ask though. So since you have Cleveland as your first team, who's the second team?
Toronto. You see what Toronto did?
The Schroeder contract's hilarious.
Yeah, $80 million to Pirtle. He's your what at best, like 4th, 5th best player.
All right, which contract's worse, the Dillon Brooks or the Jakob Pirtle?
No, I think Pirtle's worse. I really do.
The Pirtle one's tricky because I think Toronto butchered the trade deadline last year when they should have traded half their team. And instead they were buyers at the deadline to lose in the play-in. But they kind of had to pay Pirtle because they traded assets to get him during the offseason. So they were already invested. What?
Didn't they trade a first-round pick for him?
That's what I'm saying. It was sunk cost fallacy. You can't trade a first-round pick Spurs, and then not bring him back. Yeah. So Toronto had a brutal offseason too. Yeah. The Schroeder contract just makes me laugh. That's like, so funny.
I feel like they're in the same space as Portland to a certain degree. They don't know what they want to do. Pascal and OG have been linked to being traded since last offseason. So they got to do something. They don't have a point guard. Scotty Barnes regressed in his second year. I wasn't really big on Scotty Barnes like everybody was in his rookie year. But again, you draft
Scotty Barnes. Lonte, put some respect on his name.
And yeah, so I like Grady there because he adds shooting, but again, you don't have a table setter. VanVleet's gone. Pirtle is solid. I don't want to make it seem like I don't like Pirtle. I do like Pirtle, but for that number, I think that's pretty big. When you could have got somebody, I mean, who was going to pay him $80 million?
He's fine, but they're
I
in
don't know.
purgatory. I mean, they're not going to be bad enough to tank, and they're not going to be good enough to actually do anything of note. So they're just stuck in no man's
So
land.
they're in that 500 range, and I think that's the worst range to be in. Ask the Chicago Bulls and the Washington Wizards. That's the worst place to be in.
I think Masai's had a brutal year and a half, and nobody's really talked about it.
Well,
really,
after
sorry. I was just going to say,
ahead.
after drafting Scotty Barnes, I don't know if I've agreed with basically anything that he's done the entire. I would have traded OG already for 3 first-round picks.
Yeah, I think that from the things that I've read, I mean, it's all hearsay that the asking price for some of the players on Toronto from Masai has been like through the roof. Like it's unbelievable on what he's asking. How did
they keep VanVleet?
I don't know.
How'd they keep all of these players? Your team was going to be like, they should have traded half the team at the trade deadline last year. I think Masai has been brutal for the last year, but he built up a reputation because he got quiet and they won a title. But still, Toronto, I can agree with. Cleveland's been bad too. Those are fair losers to mention as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, more so Portland is just like, I mean, even though the contract is bad for Jeremy Grant, they're going to get something back. They're going to get a haul back for Lillard. Well, at least that's what they should. Now, again, we've seen people get like basically fleeced before, but again, I don't think they're going to be that dumb to not get decent value for Lillard. But with these other teams, I mean, they're in no man's land. Like Toronto, what do you do? Like I mean, the market is kind of settling down, so you can move off of certain people, but some of these rookies and second year players are developing well, so they might not want to take a chance on Siakam or OG. OG's hurt a decent amount, so. Again, I don't know what they're going to do. Cleveland, I just don't like their backcourt depth and what they did with Allen. They're probably going to move off of Allen, which they should. Okoro should probably be gone. LeVert, I have no idea why they extended him at all either. So just for the landscape of their roster right now, I think that Cleveland and Toronto got worse, whereas Portland was already bad. The contract is bad, but they're going to get something back is my main say.
It might have been worse for Portland because they were the first team to give out basically a massive deal the entire free
That's
agency.
Timothy Mozgov. Remember the Lakers gave Timothy Mozgov that money?
All-time
first deal.
Right there. Yeah.
First
so
deal.
the first deal is always going to look
4 years, 60.
60 yeah.
That's the tone for everything else. So Portland going first made it look worse, but I think you put together a solid list of teams that can compete for biggest loser of the offseason. It's a fair 2, but I think we agree on the 4.
Yeah, right? I mean, I don't have a problem with anybody saying Portland. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just going off of how I look at the team landscape. And again, Cleveland was the 4 seed, and throughout the season, I think they were flirting with like top 3-ish with Philly and Boston. They just had a spurt down the stretch where
they were hanging around with Milwaukee for the division,
right? And where they lost Garland and they had some things go bad for them. But again, you got a chance to elevate in the Eastern Conference, who's getting better. Not touching the West, but they're getting better, and you decide to do that with your roster. I don't get it.
That's
all right. That's enough negativity, guys. Let's get over to some teams that maybe won free agency or made some significant moves, maybe not significant moves, but moves to keep them in contention or, improve their roster for a playoff push or even make them a playoff team. I think one team that maybe not a lot of people are talking about that I thought had a great, or kind of just retooling the team was the Lakers. There was a lot of rumors throughout the offseason or going back to last season that being linked to Kyrie Irving. We heard about Dame last summer as well, adding a third superstar, but they really got some depth on this team around LeBron and AD. And obviously that, again, is a team it's contingent on health because, number one, we know what Anthony Davis is that he gets hurt more often than not. And now LeBron is getting up there in age as well. And we see that kind of transpire after they did win the championship. that both those guys have been on and off the court for the past several seasons due to various injuries. But if you kind of take a look at some of the moves that they did make, the biggest name that was obviously rumored of either re-signing with a team or leaving was Austin Reeves, just because of the season that he did have and how much he did improve for the LA Lakers. Now, I'm very curious. I know that meme that goes around from the past several seasons on what LeBron kind of said to Austin Reeves at that moment, and he just kind of made this like what the fuck face. I want to know what LeBron said to Austin Reeves at that point, because everything kind of changed after that. But they re-signed him. They got Rui Hachimura back, who was really good for them in the playoffs as well. A hot name that we had talked about during the playoff run for the Miami Heat was Gabe Vincent. They were able to sign him to a 3-year, $33 million deal. They got D'Angelo Russell back. So I thought, and I think they also signed Jackson Hayes as well. That gives them some front court depth as well. So I low-key thought the Lakers did a really good job in this offseason, in this free agency, to kind of retool this roster and have actual depth pieces around LeBron and AD. Scott, thoughts on the Lakers moves?
Yeah, I think they were one of the winners
Yeah.
of the free agency period. I wouldn't have potentially brought back D'Angelo, but maybe that's just because of how bad he was at the end. And if the argument is the main competition you're going to have is the Nuggets, then you probably shouldn't bring back the guy that was unplayable in the entire series. So I'll have fun taking his PRA unders again if I have the opportunity. But for the sake of the offseason, I thought the Lakers were one of the bigger winners. Are they good enough to win a title? I don't know about that, but at least they addressed some of the concerns they had for their overall roster. I still don't think they really have a backup center. Jackson Hayes is still a very slender guy. I don't think he's big enough to be a backup center. So there could be one spot they could still use. They let Bamba walk. He barely played. I'm not even sure if he did play for him, but still. The point is the Lakers, I thought, were one of the winners involved. I don't think that they really made themselves a guaranteed title contender, but they're a top 5, top 6 team in the league. They made the Western Conference Finals last year, and they got better. So I will give the Lakers props. I'm with you. They were one of the winners. I'm not sure if they were the biggest winner, but overall, they signed a lot of people and potentially can maybe get over the hump. I'm skeptical, but they're in a spot where they potentially could get back to the finals, in theory.
Lonte, you want to talk about the Lakers, and then if you want to throw out a team that you thought won free agency.
So I thought the Lakers had a good free agency to start. They filled some needs. I was weary of the Rui deal, kind of high for my liking. But I guess he'll go into have a full off season and he'll be able to learn with those guys instead
kind
of
of balanced out though. They overpaid Rui, but they underpaid Reeves, so kind of just
That's the biggest thing, man. I can't believe nobody even tried to offer Reeves more money. But
I think there may have been a team out there. Maybe we just don't know.
Did. He just preferred to go back to the
just
Lakers.
Be in LA. I mean, you're in LA, you're playing with LeBron, and you're just in California. So I don't think.
That was my thing. But still, I mean, from undrafted and somebody throws you $90 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to go, and get more shots, be the man, be more of the man. But again, everybody isn't built to be that kind of player. So, I mean, I thought that was a very, very friendly deal. Love the Vincent signing. He's a perfect LeBron guy. Spot up and shoot it. He can take you off the dribble, runs well in the pick and roll. And I mean, I'm not a Jackson Hayes guy, but he is lengthy, long. He'll be able to, when AD's out for extended periods of time, he'll be able to come in, run the pick and roll, run the floor, block some shots. But I really like Castleton. They played Castleton. They drafted Castleton or signed him. I think they signed him, not drafted.
From Florida, right?
From Florida, yeah. So I think he'll be a big piece going down the stretch. He's a big guy. I think he's like 7'2". I think he led the nation in block shots back-to-back years, or top 5, top 10 at least, in block shots. So I think he'll have a great chance to play back up behind AD. He's got a good feel for the game, good offense, good touch. He runs the pick and roll well. So I think that the younger guys are better. I did not like the Cam Reddish thing. Did not like that at all.
That guy's been bouncing around
Yeah.
more than golly.
Yeah, I mean, he's just. I have no idea why.
I was out on Reddish at Duke, so I was on the right side the entire time. The
Yeah,
argument is you're not paying him anything. He
Yeah, I
might
get
get
that.
cut halfway through the year, but I'm
Yeah.
not a Reddish guy at all.
Yeah, I get that. And then D'Lo, I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I think they'll probably end up moving him during the season anyway. So I'm not really like as down on that as some people are. I mean, he did some things well in the regular season, shot the ball extremely well in the regular season. I think they'll probably up his value and likely move off him in the middle of the season. I like our young guy like Max Christie, Maxwell Lewis, who can really shoot the ball. I don't know if you guys seen that clip they made. It's just like a minute and a half of them just shooting the ball, making every single shot. Like, I don't know if it was, like altered or whatever, but they like Maxwell Lewis can really shoot it. And I like Jalen Hood-Schifino. I think he should be the starting point guard. I know I'm higher on him than most, but just his feel for the game.
Leader of that fan club.
Yep. Listen, man. I love
He was good at
Jalen.
Indiana in the second half of the year.
Love Jalen Hood-Schifino. Look at his numbers in big games. Like when they play big games against good competition, like other NBA guys, he was extremely well as a freshman. And he wasn't even supposed to be like the guy. I think Xavier Johnson got hurt, and he just like was so good. He ran an NBA style offense with Mike Woodson. Played with a big Trace Jackson Davis, who has now he's not AD, but he has a similar skill set to what AD can bring to the floor. So I like Jalen Hood-Schifino a lot. I think the Lakers did a really, really good job in free agency.
I still think they need another center, but for now, they address most of their concerns.
Watch Castleton, man. Castleton's going to be good. I think he's going to be good.
Walker Kessler 2.0.
Yeah, really.
Lonte, you want a team that you thought won free agency or the?
I mean, it's not. Yeah, it's not sexy, but I mean, I think Milwaukee, they kept those guys, and that's what you need. You wanted to keep those guys. You kept Brook, you kept Middleton. Now, I think it's some other things that you've got to address. They did get Crowder back, right? Was Crowder back?
Yeah, but I mean, he wasn't much of a factor there, was
he?
Yeah,
but Crowder back,
or was he still injured?
They lost Ingles, so I guess it was the trade-off.
He went to Magic,
Yeah, but I think that having a full offseason, he'll be implemented a lot better. But I mean, I know it's not sexy. I think them and the Kings, they just the stability, keeping those guys together. And Milwaukee, we all know that with Giannis on the floor, they're automatic title contender. They can't play any worse than what they played in that Miami series. So I think they'll come back hungry. I would love to see them get a little bit more shooting outside for that second unit. They did lose Javon Carter, which was pretty big loss in that backup role. Yeah. So I think Milwaukee is a winner simply because they just had the stability to keep those guys back together. Because if they lost Lopez or Middleton, then I think that window was closing at a rapid rate. So I think Milwaukee and Sacramento for keeping their teams together. A lot of people were down on the Barnes thing. I mean, it's whatever. I mean, I think Barnes is fine. He just had a bad series. So I think those two are my low-key winners of free agency so far.
Scott, do you have a team that you were a huge fan of their signings?
Yeah, I think as a whole, the Clippers are going to still rely very heavily on Kawhi and Paul George's health, which is not going to go well, just full disclosure. But for the sake of what they did this offseason, they really didn't have any cap space, and they somehow had the best contract signing of any team. You're telling me Schroeder's getting roughly $13 million a year, and they got Westbrook for $4 million? They're paying Westbrook $4 million. Like I was low on Westbrook last year, partly because he hasn't learned anything about his mistakes and how he's not the same guy that he used to be. But it was mostly the contract.
Yeah. And
how bad the contract was. You're paying Westbrook $4 million a year with all the money that's going around. Dillon Brooks got 20. I don't think Dillon Brooks is better than Russell Westbrook.
Jacoberto got
Westbrook,
20.
Right. And Westbrook played well in the playoffs when Kawhi and PG was out.
Yeah.
He was terrible in the closeout in the elimination game, but who cares? He was good before that when he was by himself in that series. But still, I got to give the Clippers props. I like KJ Martin too. I thought he was a nice pickup for them, relatively cheap, but it was mostly just being shocked. I'm reading all the contracts. Bruce Brown's getting $20+ million. Dillon Brooks got 20+. Schroeder got 13 or so. Westbrook got $4 million a year. For that signing alone, I got to mention the Clippers. I think they did a great job for their limited cap space.
There's a under the table check that's being handed by Steve.
I'm sure
Ballmer,
there is, but $4 million a year for Westbrook is a bargain.
Yeah, that's a good listen, man. They're gonna get Dame. They're probably gonna flip Westbrook into Dame. Watch.
Last one that I did want to mention, the brand new team on the East Coast, the Villanova Knicks. Dante DiVincenzo ends up on the New York Knicks. Now he's paired there with Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart. And it's funny, if you follow Josh Hart on Twitter, he's tweeting at Mikal Bridges, "Hey, bro, pick up your phone, man." But I think that's another good piece for the Knicks to pick up. I think they're now, again, we've been saying this for, I don't know, the past 5 years, maybe the past decade. Now they're probably now a superstar player away from being a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference. There's still definite moves to be made there. I know Julius Randle, man, is not going to be your top guy, but the Jalen Brunson deal is now looking more and more genius by the New York Knicks of what they gave him last season. We brought in Josh Hart. They exercised that $13.2 million deal, and you also signed Dante DiVincenzo to a 4-year, $50 million deal there. Obi Toppin, not there anymore. I think he signed with the Pacers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but they got his brother, so they don't matter. That don't matter. They're fine.
Yeah,
but the Knicks
they traded him to Indiana.
Yeah, they traded. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
So looks like the Knicks are on the right trajectory here, kind of forming this team here. But did you guys have any thoughts on the Knicks and Dante DiVincenzo, or anything else we want to throw out there before we close out this episode? Scott, I'll start with you.
Knicks improved. They're not going to win anything as long as Randall's there, so they're going to have to wait it out. But for the most part, they're going to be a solid Eastern Conference team, probably a ceiling of a second-round elimination. But they have a couple of good glue guys. Brunson's good, but Randall, as we know, will always vanish in playoff games, and he's still on the roster. So, yeah, I think the Knicks are going to be relatively similar to last year with a little bit more depth and offensively late in games. They're still going to be really ugly to watch. So I don't see that much changing, but I like DiVincenzo as a player.
Yeah, I agree. Lonte, go about the Knicks and any other team you want to mention. That I'm going to give you the floor about 5 minutes to anything you want to get off about Summer League here.
Yeah, I didn't like the Dante signing, to be honest, especially for that number. That's a high number for
it's a decent amount of money for a guy that's kind of similar to Josh Hart.
Yeah, he's exact same as Josh Hart. I mean, he's just a better athlete.
Or Grimes. Honestly, they have a lot of those guys.
Yeah, so my thing is they got Quickly, Grimes, DiVincenzo, Hart, and Brunson. So who's gonna play? Like, I mean,
I think IQ might get traded, but that's a separate story. But we'll see.
Yeah. So my thing, I mean, I like Dante. Don't get me wrong. Like, but again, I would have liked for them to get another wing, and give my guy RJ Barrett some help on the wing, Scott. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. I mean, I like Dante. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, kind of high for my liking, and I feel like they got the same player, somewhat. So. Yeah, that's about the only other team that I think. The Bulls were trash. I thought Kobe White should have went somewhere else. Their backcourt is just as jammed as anybody's. With Carter, Kobe, DeRozan, and they're just a mess right now. So
unfortunately, not Lonzo, because they got the official $10 million save from the.
Oh, they did.
Okay. So what did they release him?
No, they kept him, but they're applying
insurance
for the $10+ million player exception because he can't play.
Yeah, I think he's done. Like for
I'm not sure he's ever going to play again.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play. I hope I'm wrong, but the reports and reading that don't look good. But his brother just got $260 million, so he'll be fine.
Yeah, there's one team that I do want to talk about briefly, which I'm not going to spend much time on. But if we're going to talk about the Clippers and the Lakers and what they did, I got to talk about one team that a lot of people are praising for the offseason. I feel the same exact way I did before. The Phoenix Suns, they signed a bunch of guys to the minimum.
Yeah.
They're overreacting every sign that the Suns made. And as a Nets fan, I really liked Watanabe when I watched him play for about half the year. He was a healthy scratch for the final 2 months of the season. And then he signed with Phoenix. And everyone's going, I can't believe they got Watanabe. What are you talking about?
But wasn't he like a really good three-point shooter?
Yeah, he was. Oh, he was leading the league in three-point shooting.
Oh yeah, he's a great shooter. That's the point is KD made that call.
They're dragging out like Eric Gordon and Watanabe And they re-signed like Torrey Craig, and everyone's like, "Whoa, Phoenix, what an offseason." I'm like, "What are you talking about? It's a bunch of league minimum players surrounded by 4 main guys. Like this is the exact offseason they were supposed to have."
Yeah.
I was not overly impressed by Phoenix. They didn't butcher anything, but everyone's giving them praise for some reason. I don't really know why, to be honest with you. I think Phoenix had a pretty standard offseason as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it was just a lot of guys that coming in on the minimum, hopping on the the Beal, the Durant, and
They
the
were
Booker.
just hyping up everybody. The Watanabe? I can't.
Hey,
he didn't
I
play for
didn't
2
hate it.
months.
Hey man, I like Watanabe, man. I'm not
I
gonna
like
lie
him
to
as a
you.
player too, but he was a healthy scratch for a month and a half, and everyone's like, "I can't believe it." The Suns GM, what a genius!
Unleash
Change the scenery,
Watanabe
man.
this season.
I'm getting a
Unleash him.
jersey, man. Give me the Watanabe jersey.
I mean, I like Watanabe, but still,
Yeah.
like it. And they lost Landell. That's a loss too that they couldn't
Yeah.
they couldn't really deal with. But
I like
Phoenix
Base
is-
Diop. I like Base Diop. I do.
Okay.
He was
Still.
good. He was good for the Spurs. Like
point is,
quality minutes. He was really good.
I don't think Phoenix had a bad offseason, but people kept trying to group them in the winners
Like
section.
that 8+ one. Yeah.
I'm not putting them in the
I'm not
winners
sure about that.
section.
I'm not sure
They
about
had an
that.
above average offseason, but it was still towards the mean as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
about that.
Lonte, we have NBA Summer League kicking off today. There are lines up on DraftKings, but we'll keep an eye on them. Maybe we could try to do a pod or two throughout the week, and if depending on when the lines do drop. But I think it's called the California Classic, if I'm not mistaken. That's tipping off in Sacramento, and then we also have one in Salt Lake City before everybody hits the Vegas. But
Yeah.
I know some of the rosters have been starting to release. I know you guys did mention, or Scott mentioned, that Pacers probably have one of the best rosters going into the Summer League. But do you have any general thoughts you want to give for the Summer League, or at least the 2 tournaments that are happening before we head to Vegas?
So the main thing that I want to let people know is if you are going to wager on this, make sure that you are locked into these teams and their updates, because their roster is configured by basically what they're going to do in Vegas. That's the big tournament and where you win a trophy at. The other things are probably just more than likely just warm-up sessions, because all the teams are not there. So you want to make sure that you know who's playing. For instance, Charlotte opened up 6.5 against the Spurs, and now it's down to 3 because I'm pretty sure Miller and a couple guys aren't playing. So different stuff like that you gotta kind of look out for. It's kind of like the NFL preseason. So be sure you just locked into these teams, the beat writers, or just reports, knowing who's playing and who's not. And some of these guys are second-year guys, like Benedict Mathurin's on their roster. He's probably not going to play the full thing. Like for Indiana, on the Spurs roster, I think I forgot who was up there. Maybe Trey Jones wasn't up there. But just different guys who are on the roster who just are not going to play throughout the full Summer League schedule. But just a few teams to bet on that I like going into. I like Dallas's roster. They got a electric backcourt with Mike Miles Jr. and Jordan Jelly Walker from UAB. They're going to be extremely fun to watch, and they got Lively and Omax on the wing.
You didn't actually let Hardy play a lot?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Hardy is another one of those guys. I don't know how much he's going to play, but he is on the roster, and that makes them even more dynamic offensively. So I think they have one of the better backcourts. I like Denver. Denver has an extremely good roster. A lot of shooters. I'm interested to see what Jalen Pickett does. He's going to be surrounded by shooters with Strother, Hunter Tyson, and a couple of other guys who didn't get drafted. We talked about Indiana. I think they have a sleeper roster. Detroit has a really interesting roster. They got Hardy, Duran on the roster, which I'm not sure. Ivy. I'm sorry, I said Hardy. Ivy and Duran on the roster, and I'm not sure they're going to play as much. So something to look out there. But they have an interesting roster. OKC and Utah round out my top. What's it? 1, 2, 3, top 6. OKC and Utah have an incredible roster. Great talent on both sides. I like to bet on teams who have good young talent and good veteran NBA experience guys coming back, like second-year guys. Like Charlotte has a good blend of that with Kai Jones, Book Knight, Bryce McAlwins, and then they have the young guys, Nick Smith Jr., Brandon Miller, Amari Bailey. They even got Leaky Black from North Carolina. So you kind of want to look for those.
Is that a good thing?
Defensively, it is.
Okay.
Just-
He's one of my
just-
least
just-
favorite college players as a North
Listen,
Carolina
just
fan.
remember what he
Yeah.
did. If you want to know what Leaky Black's all about, go look at that Alabama game and what he did to Brandon Miller. Unreal. Locked him up.
I just
But
remember
yeah.
his shooting numbers against Duke. So
Yeah,
that's
well, I mean,
what I
yeah,
remember.
he's not gonna shoot the ball well.
He
But
better not.
he's-
That's all I'm saying. He better not shoot.
He's gonna defend. But yeah, man, you got to look at the roster. Just make sure you're up to date with some of this stuff. You don't want to get burned on some of these numbers. So, yeah, man, I'll be updating. Like, I'm on Twitter for summer league stuff if you're interested in that kind of thing. If you're a sick person like I am, you're definitely interested in summer league.
Hey, man, if there's betting lines, our degenerate community is going to be betting on it for sure. So, yeah, we'll again, Lonte, we'll keep an eye. We'll try to keep an eye on it and maybe do like some quick pods before the game start. And then we'll also we'll get in depth about the Vegas Summer League. I know that starts.
Yeah,
on
Vegas
July
is the
7th.
bigger one. Yeah, Vegas is the bigger one.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that, and then we'll talk about some of the rosters. I know they'll be having odds on who's going to win it and MVP and things like that. So, yeah, NBA definitely never sleeps for sure. All right, guys, that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the NBA Gambling Podcast. A little NBA free agency recap, and then also the Damian Lillard news, as well as some a little bit of content on NBA Summer League that's kicking off in Salt Lake City and in Sacramento. But Scott, anything else you want to mention before we do get out of here for the NBA or anything else?
Not really. Nets are obviously going to win the championship. They signed Lonnie Walker, so they're ready to roll. But looking forward to the rest of the offseason. Should be fun. Still waiting on a couple of names, but for the most part, free agency is kind of done at this point. So looking forward to the Summer League. Should be fun.
Lonte, anything else?
Nah, man, I'm good. I'm about to watch the Summer League for probably like 6 straight hours. So about to enjoy my day.
There we go. Make sure to follow Lonte on Twitter at XXLonteXX. You can follow Scott on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Again, tune into the tennis gambling podcast with Wimbledon kicking off here on Monday. Scott, I'm sure we'll be dropping daily pods for the tournament there. You can follow me on
one per round.
Yeah, there we go. Follow me on Twitter at SportsNerd824. If you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel here for the NBA Gambling Podcast and follow us on Twitter at SGPN NBA. We'll be back later this week, talk some more NBA stuff, and look out for us then. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off and let it ride.